Hey, everyone. I have Brian Smith with me, and I can't wait for you guys to all meet her. But I'll go ahead and wait just a second while you're hopping on. If you are joining live, and I see a couple of you already hopping on, go ahead and say hello, say hey, and where you are joining from. I know the last nonprofit marketing. This is Ryan's first, I think, nonprofit marketing power session. My third. It is a new thing. But the last one we had a lot of people from the Midwest, a couple of people from both coasts. My friend was joining from the UK, so I'd love to hear, where are you joining from? I'm just gonna give me just a second, and I will make sure that we are live. Okay, so I can see. Hopefully. Okay, so let's go ahead and get going. I am so excited. Just a reminder. Hi, I'm Kelly, the nonprofit marketing nerd. I help nonprofits make their organization household names that make donors eager to donate. So that's who I am. I also really have a passion as a connector. If you saw my post, hi Liz from Colorado. I see one of our future guests chiming in. Thanks for joining. If you saw my post earlier this week or got my email, that I've always wanted to be a matchmaker, and this is my mini version. And actually, Rhyan talks a lot about this in her personal philosophy on growth and development, about kind of using your little pieces that you get over time and then figuring out how to monetize and use those skills to move forward. And so I'm excited to do this by bringing Ryan's brain to you. So I look forward to nerding out about all things authenticity. So thank you, Ryan, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
I know I have a bunch of questions, and also people that are chiming in. We will have some time at the end if you want to ask for any questions. But first, I want to do a little mini intro. Let's see. I'll do a mini intro for a mini intro for Ryan. If you don't know her, I've actually known her since college. So I don't want to date us, but for more than a decade. I'll say more than a decade. And it's been cool as kind of a fly on the wall to watch her career growth trajectory, as a professional trainer, to a registrar, to going back and getting your law degree as a single mom, and then going back as a compliance officer. And you've continued to do that. But the cool thing I've been watching is really, you wear a lot of different hats, and it's been so amazing to see what you've done as the founder and CEO of Brilliance HQ. I kind of nerded out on your website a little bit, and you really come alongside anywhere from solopreneurs to restaurateurs to professional athletes to help them figure out not only what is their brand about, but who they are, what do they want to monetize, how do they get there, and then making sure they can make that happen. So congratulations to you for progress so far.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit. And I see there are people messaging, letting me know that they are live. So text message letting me know they're joining live. Thank you. You can also drop it in the message box here. I'd love to hear a little bit, so as the CEO and founder of Brilliance HQ, how did you get there? What happened?
So I was working a full-time job. So many of us in the entrepreneurial space work full-time jobs and then kind of do the gig thing on the side. And at one point, I was working in a company that was very much a misalignment for me personally and professionally. And while I was in that space, I realized that I was we talk about authenticity. I was defending my body of work and the integrity that I was bringing to the role way more than I should have been.
Yeah.
And so I made the decision to leap, which I never recommend, but it happened to me. And
you and I both done this.
I left this job where I was very much being harassed for doing the thing that I was asked to do, hired to do. I left the job. And 10 days later, COVID happened. The city shut down. And so I was out there, and it was sink or swim. And so I just took a step back, and my goal in jumping was to start and focus on education as a consultant. At this time, I was finishing up law school. Um, and so I was like, okay, I know that I have this background in recruitment and retention and strategic planning. And I know that I could do enrollment management in my sleep. Like
Mhm.
from the ground up, I could take a marketing campaign and I could craft the hell out of it. And so I just decided that I was going to take those skills instead of paying the company with my time. I was going to pay myself. And so 10 days into the pandemic, I landed my first contract with a school organization, a charter school, and closed my first major contract. And I've been rolling and working ever since. I knew that in
Mhm.
law school, I wanted to work with businesses. I wanted to work with small business owners and then also larger corporations. And I didn't know how my passion of marketing was going to marry the legal aspect of things, but it's been a really great merger for me.
Oh,
So,
cool. Okay. Um, hmm. So fascinating. You and I both, as much as it's. I listen to financial podcast after financial podcast says like, make sure you have 6 months of reserves before you
agree.
ever make anything risky. And you and I both, and I've multiple times. So I just be like, nah, I'm done. I'll figure it out.
Yeah, not 6 months, and also in a pandemic. So how
Right.
much maybe we're risk happy where other people are risk averse. I don't know, but it worked for me.
Yeah. And I know so many, even the nonprofit space, so many nonprofit founders are
Mhm.
kind of where you are, where they're like, they are trying to figure out, they carry a 9 to 5, trying to figure out like when to leave. And I think if
Yeah.
someone does have questions about that specifically, is it okay if they follow up with you?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
That's one of those things where there's no perfect timing. There's no right time to leap. There's a right
Yeah.
time for you as an individual. And I really tried to make sure that I kept my overhead and my costs low when I left. And so I know a lot of people try to, especially in the nonprofit space, like I feel like a lot of people try to launch with everything. And I'm very much a low tech, no tech before high tech person. And so I started my business with a $12 a month Canva account and a Zoom account.
Uh-huh.
And I fumbled through my website. My website is still not what I want it to be because I did it
Yeah.
myself.
Okay.
Did it myself. I did the necessary things to protect my business financially,
Mhm.
which we could talk about, but I really did not want to incur a lot of overhead cost. And one way that I was able to do that is as I drafted contracts and scope of work, I wrote third party contractors into my overall contract, so I didn't have that overhead of having and needing to employ folks. And so I just
Yeah.
tried to be really smart with that. But there is no right time to leap.
No.
It happens. You make it work.
Yeah. So, I know you personally, and actually, like, I only know of you professionally, right? I know you more personally than professionally.
Right.
And I want to confess that so I was talking to my business coach and
Mhm.
he was asking, like, I was like, oh, I don't know, like, there are these people I really, really want to talk to about things. And then there
Yeah.
are like these people that are like experts I should probably ask. And even like the way I voiced it, that I knew. So as soon as, he gave me the courage to be like, no, talk to the people you want to talk to that'll have great conversations that are important for nonprofits to hear. And you were the first person I contacted.
Oh, thank
So
you. I love that.
yeah,
I'm so excited. I love watching your journey too. So it's a
awesome.
mutual admiration.
Thank you, thank you.
Mhm.
So I brought you here today because it's something I value so much. I wish nonprofits, especially in the marketing space, valued so much more, and individual nonprofit professionals saw the value in it. Is authenticity. And one of the things I've heard, like probably right about the time you were launching your business, authenticity was such a buzzword. Like right at the beginning of COVID, every single person talked authenticity this, authenticity now. And now I'm like, is authenticity dead? Was that just like a
Mm,
2020 thing? I'd love to hear
yeah.
your feedback on that.
I think there's so many buzzwords that we all heard during that time. Diversity, equity, inclusion. All of those words were kind of the buzzwords, the marketing buzzwords, right? I think but where the rubber meets the road is when we're looking at building strong businesses, we're looking at developing a set of core values. And so for me, authenticity is a huge part of my personal core values and then also my business core values. And I think sometimes people don't realize core values shape and influence our business trajectories. But if you have a set of core values, every single thing that you do as a business entity should flow through those core values. When you are, I was listening to a training, Grant Cardone has his marketing team is phenomenal, right? And they were
Just
doing
recording a YouTube video about him. This is so funny.
their marketing team was leading a conversation on core values. And what they were saying was, when you hire, when you onboard, when you evaluate and assess your employees and your programs, all of those should run through the gauntlet of your core values. Your core values are things that are going to shift over time. They're not static, but they are true to the essence of how you are going to go about doing your business. And so authenticity, while it was a buzzword for me, it's very much alive and well personally. And I think also it may have been a buzzword for companies and culture in our culture, but people, consumers, are still crying out for authentic voices, authentic brands. I think we are seeing, with cancel culture, we're seeing a lot of people be very quick to disengage and to call out companies who are not really walking in that authentic truth of their brand. Authenticity, due to COVID and everyone being online and everyone watching a lot more, authenticity is something that is very easy to call on the carpet, or lack of authenticity for that matter. And so I think it is alive and well from a consumer interest, but I think companies and brands are starting to fall away from that, which I think is very dangerous, because when you fall away from what the consumer is actually asking for, there's a huge disconnect, and you'll start to see it in your sales. You'll start to see it in your engagement and your community development. So those are things to think about.
Oh my word. I think for nonprofits, I mean, that's directly just to kind of, for nonprofits, that's directly transferable to like, who's your target audience, but also like, what do donors want to hear? And the last thing they want to hear is to be talked at, right?
Yes.
Or to like I know that like fakey is oversimplifying, but it's just like not showing up. Like I think one of the things that makes me, in the nonprofit space and marketing, and I'm going to jump to picking your brain and then I'll go back to some of the questions I have.
That's okay.
In the nonprofit space and marketing, so many people just don't show up because they don't look perfect, right? And let's be real, like if you're the executive director of a soup kitchen that's somehow getting pulled on the line, like you're never going to look perfect. So they just don't show up at all because they're not wearing a suit and their hair is disheveled and they had to show up to open the building at 8 a.m.
Sure.
What would you say to that executive director?
I think that the perfect message strategy, the perfect brand strategy is a culmination of both. I think that you have to understand that you have a number of audiences and how they engage with you is going to be different. There are some folks who want to see the perfectly coiffed and polished and all of that, because that communicates intentionality and how you put yourself out there. But then you have people who want to see the real in what you are putting out. And so they want to see it behind the scenes. They want to know about a challenge that you're having, because what you're doing is you're cultivating and you're creating a solid, it's message mastery, right? In corporate spaces and sales, we call that executive mind. I'm a salesperson through and through. And I know for some people that feels yucky. I think everyone should have a sales background, because you cut your teeth in confidence. And so one of the things that we talk about in sales is being able to sell a widget to a consumer, and then also take that same product and pitch it to a CEO, but the messages are drastically different, right? When I'm talking to a CEO, I'm talking about human capital. I'm talking about return on investment. When I'm talking to an end user, a consumer, I'm talking about, time and capacity building. And I'm talking about, how is this going to save you money and cost over time? And so I think that there has to be both. I think that especially for our nonprofits, this idea to want to be perfect to our donors, I think that authentic voice is showing both sides of the coin. There is a place for those perfectly coiffed donor reports. There is a place for that, but there is also a real conversation that I think your donors are wanting to have. And I also think that when you limit your message to one type of outcome, you're cutting out potential donors. You're cutting out potential community partners. And so you have to think through how you want to engage and who you want to engage and diversify your message in that regard.
Yeah. So when is authenticity done wrong? Can you think of a time, or could you share like when you're like, oh, that's cringy, or like, oh, that's too much, or because I know that line is something people are always trying to figure out. So do you have any insight on that?
Authenticity is done poorly when it's insincere. And I know that that seems paradoxical. But what I mean by that is, when George Floyd was murdered, every major company had a moment where they stopped and they blacked out their Instagram squared, right? Instagram square. Well, was that and I can tell you right now whether or not that was a sincere or an authentic moment based on the policies, process, and internal actions that followed. And we're looking at the fallout and kind of return to normalcy now. You have companies like Google who created DEIB programming on the wake and the heels of this great tumultuous time in our country, in our lifetime, and are now slow walking it back. So your authentic moment was not actually a sincere effort. And we judge that based on the engagement and how you move post that authentic moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think good guidance. And I just had this conversation actually about like when and how to show up. And like, and this is a whole other topic for a whole other day, but who should have the voice? Who should be speaking? And if you're just going to show up to put some cheesy post up and then go away, like, are you really being authentic? Is
You're
that
not.
really like,
No, that's, I think in a lot of respects, that level of an authenticity really speaks to consumerism and not true authentic behavior. Because if you are acting authentic, if you're saying, hey, I'm in solidarity, I stand with you, so that you can only influence consumer buying trends, then that's not an authentic, that's not a sincere authenticity. And it's not authentic. You're just agreeing to get along. And I think that so many people do that. And so I question a lot of companies' commitment to authentic voice. In the space of influencers, right? One of the things that we see is this major pressure for personal brands, people who have personal brands, to look perfect. And I saw your Instagram post and your LinkedIn post about these perfectly, pitted Canva posts.
Yeah.
As a Canva lover, I cracked up laughing because I think I love Canva, and we can talk about how to use it effectively. But I think that so many people are focused on the aesthetic and not the message, that it gets lost in the sauce. But again, constantly what we see are consumers, whether it's consumers of content or consumers who have all of them have buying power, but consumers with the intent to buy, all of them are looking for that imperfection sales. You can get on YouTube right now, and I will sit and watch people clean their living room. I will sit and just watch someone deep clean, knowing good and daggone well my kitchen looks the exact same, but I'm fascinated because they were authentic and I feel brought into their dining room, so to speak. And I think as nonprofits, if we can get to the point of understanding that perfection can sometimes be a repellent, and our authentic moments effectively draws people into our space, it invites them into our community, I think we would go a lot further.
Yeah. I think, it's so funny. I personally coach nonprofits quite a bit about how to connect with their constituents. And a lot of it is like, just be real, like say something real. Cause they're often like trying to like, I don't know, like how many, what is, I don't know what the phrase is, but they're like trying to like over calculate, then they do nothing. And then they end up just like posting to like 72% of like
it's
a
analysis
statistic. I'm like,
paralysis. Like
wait,
it's not effective. It's just not.
yeah,
It's
wait.
not. And so
Okay, so I
many,
want to,
oh, go
sorry.
ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, so many people have amazing stories. Part of the challenge is what is excellent to other people sometimes is common to us, right? I can talk all day about marketing and messaging and mastery because it's like it's a second voice to me, it's a second language. But for someone who is not in that space, it's like, what are you talking about? And I think sometimes the same is true for us as we're thinking about storytelling. Things that we deem as common and normal and we don't think people want to hear about, those are the exact things that we should be sharing. And I think sometimes we need to step back and have a real evaluation of what do we have on the table that might be of value or beneficial to someone else. The only way that we do that is to really think through who our avatars are, right?
Yeah.
So that we can cultivate a message accordingly.
Yeah. And I think you're gonna love this. I'm like, yes, defining a target audience and avatars are great. Also, like I think in the nonprofit space, like if it gives you goosebumps and you're excited to talk about it, chances are someone else wants to hear it. Like there's also just the like, I want to say like that's like the lowest bar ever. Like it's giving you warm and fuzzies and goosebumps. I called the goosebumps test. It's a thing I made up. Then like somebody else probably wants to hear it too.
Well, and if it's giving you goosebumps, 9 times out of 10, it's your sweet spot. And it's the thing that you are best equipped to share. A lot of times we leave the storytelling to someone else who is not equipped to share. And the reason I say use the word equipped, it hits you differently. So someone else could talk about branding and marketing and it fall flat. But when I talk about it, it's my jam, right? I'm standing squarely in my space. You can't tell me otherwise. I love everything about it. But someone else it may be like reading from a prompter. You are equipped. You are the best person equipped to tell your story. You might need a little help crafting that.
Yeah. We do have, I know I have a couple of questions that have come in. I'm going to go ahead and share one right now. Let's see. I'm the founder and CEO of a nonprofit. Is it in bad taste to pitch my nonprofit myself on video, or does that come off as braggy? Oh, I totally get it. So, Kimberly, thank you for your question. Yeah, I think you already literally just kind of answered that. Like, if it gives you warm and fuzzies and you're showing up and you can tell your story, like, I
want to address that. I think thank you, Kimberly, for sharing that. Imposter syndrome affects every sector. It affects for-profit, nonprofit. It affects education. It affects all of us. And I think sometimes you may not realize that you're operating or playing small because you don't want to come off braggy or offend someone else. But I think that if we do not stand squarely in the places that we're passionate about, you don't always have to be the face, but you definitely shouldn't be ashamed or feel shame or feel concerned about telling your story. There's sometimes if you understand that you are not the appropriate person, if maybe you come off harsh, maybe you need some media training, you being the proverbial nonprofit founder. Maybe there's some things that we need to do to level a person up. If your delivery is not effective, then absolutely we don't want you to, maybe you do need to bring someone else in to tell your story. But if you are passionate and you've got a great message and you're comfortable, there's nothing wrong with that. I think you need to think through who your audience is and the core message that you're trying to deliver to determine who best to deliver that message. Maybe that's you, maybe it's someone else. Either way, it's appropriate.
Awesome. Okay. So I know I said we're going to stick straight to 20 minutes, and I hope it's okay for those of you that are with me. We're going to go over a little bit more, but I promise 30 minutes or less. I just have a quick question. I got a question prior to that someone that didn't even want to slide to the message, but they sent it to me. So I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
Was asking basically like, how do you draw the line between, and I guess I'll preface like, Ryan and I are both of a generation that we've lived through public private being like totally separate. So now it's like so muddled, right? So how do you show up authentically and still be professional? that was just kind of the question. Any recommendations on that line?
So I'm gonna answer that question with a question. I'm wondering if when we're saying show up professionally, are we talking about a personal brand development?
Yeah.
I am of the opinion that in a professional space, an employee should have a personal brand. And not everyone feels that way. Not every company feels that way. But I think your personal brand and your business brand sometimes can go hand in hand, and sometimes they're independent of each other. Oftentimes, what happens is people will spend the bulk of their time building their business brand, not realizing that their personal brand is the perfect tool to fuel the business brand. And what I mean by that is, if you, let's say that you are the founder of a nonprofit that focuses on personal development for, K-12. Great. Love that for you. Quick K-12 educators. You are building this nonprofit. All of your content centers around your program. It centers around the execution, your outcomes. But then you, as the owner, are over here off to the side, and you have a lot to contribute to this conversation. You want to be a thought leader in this space. You have the opportunity to tell your personal career journey, your the why behind the organization's development. There's so many things that you can do in a personal brand space that will fuel your business brand, your nonprofit business model. I think that it's an also and, not an either or. And I think both are acceptable.
Yes, and that 100% aligns with every piece of advice I give. So thank you for reinforcing it. I did not tell Ryan, if you watch me regularly, I did not tell Ryan to say that. We have not talked prior to this. All the executive directors I'm forcing to go live and develop plans and be thought leaders in their space. And I did not tell her to say that.
No, I mean, I wholeheartedly believe that. When I work with school leaders, one of the things that I talk to them about is developing their personal brand, whether that's writing articles, whether that's sharing on LinkedIn. Believe it or not, LinkedIn is a fantastic place in terms of creating reach and a quickly accessible platform. It's easier to access and to create a platform on LinkedIn than it is on Instagram or Facebook, because the algorithms are so intense on those sites. But LinkedIn really has a simple algorithm. You have to share and you keep content on the site. And it's a very easy place to develop a community and to develop a voice that ultimately will elevate you in the eyes of people that you're wanting to build an ecosystem with.
Yay. Okay, so I know I only claimed 20 minutes of your time. I've taken 28. I'd like to go ahead. So thank you. And I think Ryan and I could nerd out forever, and I love picking her brain. Thank you so much for donating your time to nonprofits to help them learn a little bit more about. We touched on authenticity and also just kind of more bigger picture, some marketing and branding things that are so important. Is there anything you have going on that people need to keep an eye out for?
Yes. So I have a series of workshops that will be coming out that are geared towards big branding for business. And the target audience is solopreneurs, it is nonprofits, it is school leaders. I really want to give people the tools to create branding and marketing that elevates their business. I think right now, for many people in the founder space, branding and marketing is a major expense that people don't know how to convert to a return. And so I would really like to, I would love to invite you all to participate and stay tuned. That it'll be a series of programs that I'll kind of group together. And I think most of them will be digital. So I would love to share that with your audience when the time comes.
Yeah, and I will, Ryan, if you're watching live, you won't get those. If you're watching the recording, and look down below, if I have the links, they will be down below in the description. Okay.
Awesome.
But thank you again, Ryan Smith of Brilliance HQ. Thank you guys so much. Ashmin, thank you for joining, and thank you. I will see you next week at noon on Thursday for another Nonprofit Marketing Mastery Power Session. We'll be talking all about, and Ryan kind of laid it down, I'll be talking all about with Teresa Litza about LinkedIn marketing, how to do it, and is it a space where nonprofit should be. So thank you, Ryan, for your time, and see you next week, guys.